There is a shipwreck sitting at the bottom of Pearl Harbor that has been bleeding oil every single day for over 80 years, and nobody has stopped it. Not because they forgot about it, not because they cannot find it, and not because they do not know it is there. The USS Arizona is one of the most visited war memorials in the world. Millions of people stand above it every year and watch the oil rising to the surface with their own eyes. The Navy knows it is leaking. The Environmental Protection Agency knows it is leaking. The National Park Service monitors it constantly. And still, the oil keeps coming. The reason why is one of the most fascinating and quietly heartbreaking stories in American naval history. To understand it fully, you have to start not with the attack, but with the ship herself. The Arizona was launched in 1915, commissioned into the United States Navy in 1916, and served for over 2 decades before December 7th ever happened. She was a Pennsylvania-class battleship over 600 feet long, and she had been modernized several times throughout her service life. By 1941, she was considered a frontline capital ship. She was not old and forgotten. She was active, crewed, and fully operational. The men aboard her that morning were not on a ship that was winding down. They were on a warship at full readiness. On December 6, 1941, the Arizona had just been topped off with a full load of fuel. She was carrying 1.5 million gallons of bunker C fuel oil, a thick, heavy grade closer to crude oil than to anything you would put in a car. She was scheduled to return to the mainland at the end of the month, so she needed every gallon. The decision to refuel her to capacity the day before the attack is one of those details that becomes almost impossible to sit with when you know what came next. The next morning, Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor. The attack came in 2 waves. The first wave hit at 7:53 in the morning. The Arizona was moored at Battleship Row alongside several other vessels. Within minutes of the attack beginning, the ship was already taking fire. Then a single armor-piercing bomb converted from a battleship shell punched through the forward deck and detonated the ship's ammunition magazine. The explosion was not just large, it was catastrophic. It lifted the entire ship out of the water. Crew members on nearby vessels reported feeling the shockwave from hundreds of feet away. The fireball was visible across the harbor. The Arizona sank in 9 minutes. The fire burned for 2.5 days. Of the 1,512 men aboard that morning, 1,177 were killed. That is nearly 80% of her crew lost in a single morning. No other ship at Pearl Harbor came close to that number. The Arizona alone accounted for almost half of all the American deaths across the entire attack on Pearl Harbor that day. A massive amount of oil burned in the fire that followed. More poured directly into the harbor as the ship went down. But the fuel tanks are buried deep in the hull, and they are built tough. Many of them survived the blast and the fire almost completely intact. When the Arizona came to rest on the bottom at around 40 feet of depth, those tanks came with her, still holding hundreds of thousands of gallons of oil. The best current estimates put between 500,000 and 600,000 gallons still inside the wreck right now. At the rate it leaks, somewhere between 2 and 9 quarts per day depending on the study, the National Park Service calculates it could continue until around the year 2500. That is not a misprint. The oil loaded onto the Arizona the day before the attack is expected to still be leaking 500 years from now. The obvious question is why no one has simply pumped it out. That question was studied seriously starting in the 1990s by the Navy, the EPA, and the Park Service together. What they found changed how anyone thought about the problem. The Arizona has been sitting in salt water for decades. The metal is heavily corroded. Sections of the hull have already collapsed. The remaining structure is fragile in ways that are very difficult to fully assess from the outside. Scientists and divers measure the thickness of the metal in the fuel tanks every year, and the readings show slow but steady deterioration. If you drill into those tanks, you risk rupturing them entirely. Instead of a slow drip of a few quarts a day, you could release hundreds of thousands of gallons of heavy fuel oil directly into Pearl Harbor all at once. The attempt to fix the problem could turn a manageable slow leak into one of the worst environmental disasters in the history of the harbor. The cure, in almost every scenario the engineers modeled, was worse than the disease. There are other complications that rarely get mentioned. Divers who enter the wreck describe conditions that are extremely difficult to work in. Visibility inside the hull is poor, the structure shifts. Silt that has settled for decades can be disturbed by movement alone. Any serious salvage operation inside the Arizona would not be a clean, controlled procedure. It would be an unpredictable intervention inside a collapsing structure in low visibility, next to tanks holding hundreds of thousands of gallons of volatile material. The engineering risk is not theoretical. It is immediate and very real. If you have been finding this story as fascinating as I do, there is a lot more like it on this channel. Subscribing now means you will not miss the next one, and it genuinely helps this channel keep going. The second part of the problem is the oil itself. Bunker sea fuel does not behave like petrol. It is thick and slow, and it does not break down easily under normal conditions. Researchers from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution have analyzed what is leaking from the Arizona and found something remarkable. After more than 80 years underwater, the oil has barely changed chemically. Most oil spills see significant degradation within weeks. The oil inside the Arizona has been sealed in low oxygen tanks, protected from the microbes that normally consume petroleum, and it is almost identical to what went into the tanks in 1941. That has actually made the Arizona scientifically valuable. Researchers call it a living laboratory for studying how oil behaves inside a shipwreck over decades. There are around 5,000 World War II wrecks on the ocean floor worldwide, and most of them are carrying fuel. The Prince of Wales and the Repulse are off the coast of Malaysia. The Bismarck is in the North Atlantic. The Musashi is in the Sibuyan Sea. Dozens of others lie in shallower waters closer to populated coastlines and marine ecosystems. What eventually happens to the fuel inside all of those ships is a question that carries serious environmental implications, and the Arizona is one of the only places on Earth where scientists have been able to study that process in real time over a long enough period to draw meaningful conclusions. The data coming out of Pearl Harbor is being used to model what may eventually happen at dozens of other wreck sites around the world. But the deepest reason the oil stays is not engineering, and it is not science. The Arizona is a designated war grave. More than 900 men who died on December 7, 1941, are still inside the ship. The Navy made the decision early that they would remain there, considered to be at rest at sea. The families of those men were informed. The decision was accepted. Those men were not recovered, and they were not going to be. The ship became their tomb, and the water above it became their resting place. Over 40 men who survived the attack and lived out the rest of their lives later chose to have their ashes interred inside the wreck to rest alongside their crewmates. That is not a small gesture. Those men survived December 7th, went on to live entire lives, and then decided that when they died, they wanted to go back to the ship, back to the men they had served with. That tells you something about what the Arizona meant to the people who were there. A flagpole was raised on the wreck in 1950, and the flag has been raised and lowered on it every single day since. The ritual continues regardless of weather, regardless of season, regardless of the passing of years. The Arizona is still treated as an active station in one of the most literal ways imaginable. Cutting into that hull to extract the oil means cutting into a war grave. The Navy has said clearly that this is not something they are willing to do. The people inside that ship are not going to be disturbed. That is where the conversation ends. The memorial built above the Arizona was dedicated in 1962. It was designed by an architect named Alfred Price, who was himself interned as an enemy alien after the Pearl Harbor attack because of his Austrian birth. He was considered a potential security risk not because of anything he had done, but because of where he was born. He spent the war under restriction. Years later, he was chosen to design the memorial. His structure sags in the middle and rises at both ends, meant to represent defeat, giving way to ultimate victory. It sits directly over the wreck without touching it. More than 2 million people visit every year. From the sides of that memorial, you can look straight down through the water and see the hull below. The deck is visible. The outlines of the ship are clear. If you watch long enough, you will see small, dark drops rising from the wreck, spreading into a thin rainbow sheen across the surface. People who work there call them the Black Tears of the Arizona. A 2008 Department of Defense report confirmed that bunker C fuel is harmful to marine life and raises long-term environmental concerns. The report was not dismissed. Those concerns are acknowledged and the wreck is monitored closely. But the slow drip of a few quarts a day is considered a manageable and accepted risk. Attempting to stop it is not. The math on what could go wrong outweighs the math on what is going wrong right now, and it is not particularly close. So the oil stays because the tank's held, because the hull is now too fragile to cut into safely, because the oil is so well preserved that disturbing it risks catastrophic release, and because the ship holds the remains of the men who went down with her and will not be disturbed for any reason. 1.5 million gallons went in the day before the attack. The Arizona was supposed to sail home at the end of the month. She was going to cross the Pacific, return to the mainland, and her crew was going to get leave. That was the plan. None of it happened. She never left Pearl Harbor. The oil that was loaded onto her that December afternoon is still there, still rising to the surface, drop by drop every single day. It was doing it before anyone alive today was born. It will still be doing it long after every person alive right now is gone. That is what 80 years of continuous leaking looks like from above the water, a quiet, almost invisible thread of black rising through 40 feet of harbor water every morning, every afternoon, every night, in rain and in sunshine, in wartime and in peacetime, through every decade since 1941, with no end in sight and no plan to give it one. The Arizona went into battle carrying everything she needed for a journey home. She never made it, and in a way, she has never stopped trying.